Yet my heart raced wildly, and my skin tingled with electricity at his touch. I bridged the distance that lay between us. The kiss began gently, with a tender caution. Then it is urgent. In that instant, the weight of countless months spent in solitude, enveloped in sorrow and the haunting stillness, surged forth from within me. We held on to each other, an unbreakable bond between us. Our lips met, not merely in a kiss, but in a revelation of our deepest truths. Welcome to the realm of emotional love stories. Remember to give the video a thumbs up, share your insights in the comments, and subscribe to keep up with our newest narratives. May you find joy in tranquil, soothing moments. My sincere gratitude to you. Now, let us set forth on the adventure that awaits within the tale. The evening my husband passed away, I believed I had interred every fragment of my being alongside him, particularly the piece that yearned for connection. Yet, it was then that his closest companion, Mason, began to make his presence felt, not merely with flowers for the grave, but through lingering glances that held a weight, hands that brushed against one another with an electric closeness, and a voice that sent shivers across my skin. It began with a simple gesture, a drink exchanged, a memory forged, a laughter shared. Yet, on a particular night, he softly murmured, "You need not face solitude this evening." That was the moment I stepped over a threshold that can never be undone. The earth above my husband's resting place remained newly turned, much like the guilt that lingered within me. Nearly 2 years had passed since I lost Mark. The world continued its relentless march, oblivious to the seismic shift within me, for I now lived in a reality divided into 2 distinct eras, the time before him and the time that followed. I continued to rest on my side of the bed, prepared an abundance of food, and kept the bathroom light aglow, recalling how he once mentioned he enjoyed its warmth during the night. The sorrow had transformed, no longer a force that stole my breath, but rather a lingering presence, nestled deep within my bones, a persistent ache that refused to fade. In a quaint suburb just beyond the reach of Portland, I resided in the very house that Mark and I had purchased a decade prior. The neighbors had transformed, friendships had faded, yet one constant remained. Mason, Mark's dearest companion since their college days, always made it a point to reach out. Having shared the rigors of military life, their connection endured long after they hung up their uniforms. Mason stood by my side when Mark knelt to propose, served as the best man on our wedding day, and rushed to the hospital as soon as Mark fell ill. In the aftermath of the funeral, Mason remained nearby, not in a domineering manner, but rather with a subtle reliability. He would gather the groceries, tend to the lawn when it began to overgrow, and send me a text every Sunday to inquire if I required anything. Initially, I believed it was merely his method of paying tribute to Mark, a testament to his unwavering loyalty to that cherished memory. Yet, gradually, the essence of our relationship began to shift. On a drizzly February afternoon, I found myself attempting to replace a ceiling light bulb, teetering precariously on the step stool, almost losing my balance. Mason arrived unexpectedly, a first for him, and found me in the midst of a clumsy moment. He steadied me, his hands resting on my waist, and for a moment that lingered just a heartbeat too long, we remained still, caught in a shared silence. His eyes sought mine, not with the warmth of romance, but with a depth of concern, an intense silence that enveloped me and made me lose track of my thoughts. "How are you holding up?" he inquired, his tone unexpectedly gentle. "Indeed." Simply, awkwardness seems to have taken residence within me today. He let out a soft chuckle, yet he lingered, reluctant to release his grip just yet. It was then that I began to see him not merely as Mark's best friend, but as a man in his own right. Mason stood in stark contrast to Mark. In contrast to Mark's quiet and reserved demeanor, Mason exuded a straightforward charm laced with wit. His demeanor bore the marks of a life spent in the service, rough around the edges, yet beneath that exterior lay a kindness and an observant nature that often took me by surprise. He recalled the way I preferred my coffee, the dark chocolate he would bring during my rough weeks, and the inquiries he made about the garden that Mark and I once nurtured together. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow in the kitchen, Mason lingered after assisting me with the stubborn leak of the faucet, ultimately accepting my invitation to share a meal. As we savored the spaghetti on the back porch, the sun sank behind the trees, and in that moment, I found myself laughing for the first time in what felt like ages. It was a sensation both strange and known, intertwining in a dance of paradox. He recounted tales of his youth with Mark, sharing how they once found themselves in trouble for sneaking into a dorm to play a prank on a professor, and how Mark nearly missed my wedding because Mason had challenged him to surf that very morning. I found myself laughing until tears streamed down my face, only to be overtaken by sorrow as I realized how much I missed Mark. Mason simply sat beside me, grasped my hand gently, and remained silent. Time seemed to lose its definition in the weeks that followed. Mason began to visit with greater frequency. Occasionally, it's merely for a brief conversation. At other times, it's to lend a hand with tasks. It seemed effortless, almost instinctive. Yet, there were instances when our ease with one another teetered on the edge of something deeper, his hand lingering on my back a fraction longer, a gaze that held, dialogues that ventured into intimate realms we had previously shied away from. On a quiet evening, we settled in the living room to enjoy a classic film from days gone by. As I drifted into slumber, my head found a resting place on his shoulder. As I stirred from slumber, the clock had already slipped past midnight, and there he remained, alert and attentive, his gaze fixed on the dancing credits illuminating the screen. I offered my apologies, retreating slightly, yet he halted my movement with a soft caress on my wrist. "It's all right," he remarked. "I have no objections." The weight of that moment stayed with me for days on end, yet a sense of guilt lingered within me. I pondered the transformation unfolding before me. Was I dishonoring Mark's memory? Was Mason leveraging our collective sorrow as a pathway to something that ought not to be? Or was it merely two solitary souls seeking solace in one another? Everything reached a climax one weekend when a tempest swept in, extinguishing the lights. Mason reached out to see how things were going, and without a moment's pause, he declared, "I'm on my way over." He arrived with flashlights, batteries, and a bottle of red wine in hand. Candles flickered to life, casting a warm glow as we gathered around to play cards, the soft light of the lantern enveloping us. For those fleeting hours, the outside world faded into oblivion. The relentless rain drumming against the roof, the gentle flicker of candlelight, created an atmosphere that was undeniably intimate. Excessively perilous, yet I did not intervene. As I settled into bed that night, I left my door slightly ajar. Not by design, or perhaps precisely by design. I strained to hear his footsteps, my heart racing with anticipation. Yet he never ascended the stairs. The following morning, I discovered him resting on the couch, his substantial figure nestled beneath a cozy throw blanket. He appeared serene. I lingered far longer than necessary, observing his rhythmic breaths, lost in contemplation about my own intentions and desires. Could this be grief? Could this be considered healing? Or could it have marked the dawn of something altogether different? As I lingered in Mason's presence, the intricacies of our situation began to unravel in unexpected ways. What began as mere companionship had started to evolve into something deeper. It was the subtle details that captured my attention initially. The way my skin would awaken at the mere touch of his hand against mine. The flutter in my heart as he leaned closer to whisper. And the daydreams that danced in my mind, pondering the sensation of his lips on mine. And then there were his eyes, those unwavering, inviting eyes that seemed to linger a moment too long on mine. Eyes that once held the echoes of my husband, but now appeared to mirror something altogether different. I made an effort to overlook it. I reassured myself that it was merely a figment of my imagination. I found myself in a state of vulnerability, enveloped in loneliness, yearning for any semblance of comfort after enduring such profound grief. Yet, beneath the surface, I was aware of the truth. Mason's gaze held a new intensity as he regarded me. In that moment, I found myself reacting in ways that would have astonished the person I was merely months prior. Then, on a fateful night, the world as we knew it transformed. The rain had persisted throughout the day, those gentle, sorrowful spring drizzles that enveloped the world in a sense of closeness, a profound stillness. Mason had graciously extended an offer to assist with the gutter cleaning, yet we found ourselves content to remain indoors instead. I prepared tea for us, and we settled in to watch an old film, Casablanca, of all choices. As the closing credits began to roll, we lingered in silence, a silence rich with unexpressed thoughts. He cast a glance in my direction and remarked, "You know, there are moments when I sense that Mark would wish for me to be here for you, in ways that extend beyond mere friendship." My breath hitched in my throat. I gazed at him, a swirl of uncertainty clouding my thoughts, words eluding me. The words lingered in the atmosphere, held aloft by a tension so palpable it seemed as if a fragile thread might break between us at any instant. I finally found the courage to whisper, "Do you truly believe that?" Mason inclined his head with a measured, deliberate gesture. "I do indeed. Yet only if that is your desire as well. I wish to tread carefully." Transgress. The resonance of that word lingered in my thoughts. How would Mark perceive us in this moment? His closest companion, his spouse, engaging in deep, late-night dialogues, a profound emotional connection, the sort of intimacy I hadn't experienced since the moment I lost him. And yet, a treacherous whisper within me yearned to discover the outcome of a simple affirmation. I chose not to reply. I rose to my feet, my heart racing, and informed Mason that it was time for me to retire for the night. That night, slumber eluded me. I found myself awake, caught in a tumultuous struggle between guilt and longing. Mason granted me the distance I needed, yet his gaze remained fixed on mine, seeking an elusive response. I steered clear of him, evading his calls, foregoing our customary coffee rendezvous, and hastily closing my front door. Yet, the act of avoidance was not destined to endure indefinitely. At long last, the dam succumbed to its fate the weekend that followed. While tidying up the attic during one of those unexpected grief-driven surges of motivation, I stumbled upon a box filled with Mark's old possessions, correspondence, snapshots, a weathered baseball mitt. Memories surged toward me like a powerful tide. I found myself on the attic floor, tears streaming down my face. Not the soft, silent kind, but the raw, convulsive kind that leaves you feeling utterly empty. It was a blur. I had no recollection of reaching out to Mason, Yet there he stood, as if summoned by some unseen force. He discovered me in that state, sprawled on the attic floor, enveloped by forgotten memories and tears that glistened like salt. He remained silent. He simply sat beside me, enveloping me in his embrace, allowing me to weep against his chest. That day, the conversation skirted around the realm of feelings, or what had nearly transpired between us. Yet, a shift occurred following that moment. I allowed him to return. He began to reappear once more, assisting with various tasks. Repairing the dripping faucet, he brought me dinner, fully aware that I had no intention of cooking. The distance that once felt foreign is now steeped in familiarity, yet it carries an undercurrent of tension in each exchanged glance, every fleeting touch, and the prolonged farewells at the threshold. And then arrived the evening when I discovered myself preparing with greater purpose before he arrived. I found myself changing my shirt not once, but twice. I applied mascara that had remained untouched for months, removed the lipstick, only to apply it once more. That filled me with a fear unlike any other. I found myself in a state of preparation, but for what purpose precisely? To Mason, for an opportunity to begin anew, or for an error I was unable to rectify. Upon his arrival, he observed. Though he remained silent, the intensity of his gaze conveyed an understanding of the effort I had put forth. We shared a delightful dinner, featuring grilled salmon accompanied by wine, while soft jazz serenaded us in the background. It carried a sense of romance that neither of us dared to acknowledge. Once we finished our meal, I rose to carry our plates to the sink. As I pivoted, his hand grasped mine with a gentle urgency. "Stay," he murmured gently. I stood still, caught in a moment of sheer disbelief. This was the defining moment. The instant when fate hangs in the balance, poised to sway one way or the other. I lowered myself back into the seat, each movement deliberate, my heart thundering in my chest. A sound I was certain he could perceive. His thumb glided over the back of my hand, while his gaze delved into my own. "Mia," he murmured, "I've been longing to kiss you for weeks." I took a deep breath. A deep, resounding voice within me echoed that this was fundamentally wrong. And yet, was there not something profoundly just about it? He inclined closer, so near I could inhale the rich aroma of his cologne, so near that I could sense his breath brushing against my lips. Yet just as his lips were about to meet mine, I drew away. Fear gripped me as I spoke. "I'm scared." He refrained from applying any pressure on me. "I understand," he replied. "I find myself in the same position. However, we can proceed at a leisurely pace, only when it resonates within." I nodded, my voice caught in my throat. For the first time in what seemed like an eternity, the ache in my chest no longer felt so solitary. Well past midnight, I finally extinguished the lights and nestled beneath the covers, the coolness of the sheets embracing my skin. My heart raced from the evening's events, Mason's hand resting on my waist in the kitchen, his gaze locking onto mine as he inquired if I had felt lonely. I found myself endlessly revisiting those fleeting moments, attempting to unravel the nuances of his expression, the inflection in his voice, the deliberate way his body inclined toward mine, hinting at something deeper. Then came the glance he cast my way before retreating to the guest room. It wasn't a matter of confusion, it was a deliberate act of restraint. In the stillness of the night, I found myself tossing and turning, unable to find solace in the shadows. I was not naive. I understood the delicate balance we were navigating. For more than 15 years, Mason stood as my husband's closest companion. He stood by us during Mark's fight against cancer, present at the hospital on the night of his passing, assisting in carrying the casket at the funeral. He had witnessed me in my darkest moments when I was utterly shattered. And yet, as I shut my eyes that night, it was not the memories of Mark that danced before me. Mason's hands rested gently on the back of my chair, his voice a soft murmur, while the scent of his cologne clung to my skin after he glided by. I flung the blanket away and rose, enveloping myself in the warmth of my robe. Perhaps a refreshing glass of water could provide some relief. Perhaps all I required was a moment to inhale deeply. The hallway lay shrouded in darkness, the silence of the house enveloping it like a soft blanket. I traversed the hardwood floors with bare feet, the rhythmic ticking of the grandfather clock in the living room, the sole interruption to the stillness that enveloped me. Yet as I stepped into the kitchen, I found myself paralyzed. Mason stood present. He lingered at the counter, clad in a simple white t-shirt and boxers, as he filled a glass with cool water. As my presence registered, he turned his head, his initial expression a mystery, gradually giving way to a gentler demeanor. He inquired, unable to find rest himself. I nodded, momentarily rendered speechless by the overwhelming surprise. Indeed, there are simply an overwhelming number of thoughts swirling around. He presented the glass he had just filled to me. Our fingers grazed, just a whisper of contact, and in that fleeting moment, time seemed to elongate infinitely. "Please, take a seat beside me," he said softly. We transitioned to the living room, where the sole illumination was the moonlight gently streaming through the curtains. We nestled on the couch, our shoulders brushing against each other, a subtle connection in the quiet space between us. I tightened my robe, acutely conscious of its delicate fabric. "I didn't mean to overstep earlier," he said, his voice breaking the silence unexpectedly. "Within the confines of the kitchen, I merely..." "Your well-being has been on my mind, numerous, and tonight as I found myself here once more, it felt strikingly familiar. Yet distinct. I understand," I replied gently. "The journey has been challenging." Never did I imagine that I would experience emotion once more. A moment of stillness lingered in the air, a weighty burden. "Yet you did," he murmured, his voice scarcely rising above a whisper. I angled my visage in his direction. "Did you?" He gazed at me then, truly gazed, his jaw clenched subtly as though restraining an unspoken thought. "For an extended period, I simply never allowed myself to acknowledge it. He belonged to you. I held that in high regard." "Yet I am no longer his," I murmured. It shattered the stillness with a force akin to thunder. Mason leaned in, gently tucking a strand of hair behind my ear. "This was never the way I envisioned it unfolding. Yet here you are, seated opposite me this evening, laughter spilling forth once more, your breath a gentle reminder of life." It stirred something deep within me. A memory I believed was long forgotten. My breath caught in my throat. He leaned in, drawing near until our foreheads met in a gentle connection. His hand gently cradled my cheek. "If this is incorrect, please speak up. I shall cease. Yet, if you share this sentiment, I can no longer feign indifference." My lips slowly parted. I ought to have declined. I should have intervened, yet my heart raced wildly, and my skin tingled with electricity at his touch. I bridged the distance that lay between us. The kiss began gently, with a tender caution. Then it is urgent. In that instant, the weight of countless months spent in solitude, enveloped in sorrow, and the haunting stillness surged forth from within me. We held on to each other, an unbreakable bond between us. Our lips met not merely in a kiss, but in a revelation of our deepest truths. We flowed together naturally, his hands discovering the contour of my back, while my fingers wove through his hair. He lifted me with such tenderness, transporting me to the couch as though I were a mere feather. His form loomed over me, his gaze probing into my own, seeking any hint of uncertainty, yet there was nothing. "Are you certain?" he inquired, his voice strained. I inclined my head in acknowledgement. "This is essential for me." He pressed his lips against mine once more, this time with a greater intensity. The world dissolved, the memories, the sorrow, the constraints we had adhered to so rigidly for an eternity. In that instant, it was only the two of us, free from remorse. There is no specter of Mark observing us, just two souls, shattered, yet discovering solace in the fragments of one another. The night revealed itself as a hidden mystery, measured and profound. In those fleeting instances, we lingered, fingers intertwined, gazes entwined, unearthing the sensation of being truly seen once more, desired once more. He was tender in ways I hadn't experienced in years, cautious yet eager, as if he were etching every detail of me into his memory, and I allowed him to do so. In the aftermath, we found ourselves entwined, gasping for air. With my head resting gently on his chest, his hand tenderly stroking my hair, the silence had transformed. It was no longer a weight, but a comforting embrace, rich and abundant. To my surprise, I murmured gently, "Nor did I," he whispered softly. "Yet I harbor no regrets, not in the slightest." I raised my gaze to meet his eyes. "What comes next?" He took a moment to pause. "We proceed with deliberate care, embracing each step as it comes. If this were merely tonight, I would come to terms with that. Yet, if there is more to uncover, I yearn to delve into it. In your company." My heart tightened. 1,000 reasons lingered, urging a retreat, whispering that it had been a mistake. Yet I found myself reluctant to do so. "I don't want to be alone anymore," I confessed, my voice quivering with emotion. "You're not," he whispered, drawing me in once more. For the first time since Mark's passing, a flicker of belief ignited within me. The morning sunlight poured through the blinds, painting the living room floor with golden stripes. As I stirred from slumber, I found myself nestled in Mason's embrace, my head comfortably resting against his chest, his hands encircling my waist in a tender hold. For a fleeting instant, I remained still, absorbing the steady cadence of his heartbeat, anchoring me in an unexpected reality. Initially, our words were few and far between. There existed neither extravagant proclamations nor abrupt vows. Simply a serene comprehension. As Mason brewed coffee, I lingered at the table, wrapped in one of his shirts, the remnants of last night's warmth still hanging in the air. As he set the mug before me, a gentle smile graced his lips, soft, uncertain, yet filled with a glimmer of hope. "What we did," I began, my voice scarcely more than a murmur. "Do you regret it?" He immediately shook his head. "Negative." "Do you really?" I cast my gaze upon my hands before returning my attention to him. "Negative." It seemed appropriate, though it caught us off guard. The ensuing weeks unfolded with a sense of careful deliberation. We engaged in a deep conversation, truly connecting. Concerning Mark, the experience of grief, the establishment of boundaries, and the unfolding of subsequent events. Mason made no attempt to fill Mark's shoes, and I refrained from imposing a facade that lacked authenticity. We allow it to reveal itself in its own time. There may be those who cast their judgments upon us. Let us acknowledge that we have indeed crossed a boundary. Yet, love knows no boundaries, particularly in the realm of healing. Mason didn't merely occupy the void that Mark had departed from. He guided me on a journey of self-discovery within it. For the first time in years, I found myself not merely existing, but truly embracing life once more. In his company,